for me as a designer, my work can kind of develop over time. So communication with others is one of the big threads. There was an Alain de Botton quote about how an eyebrow or an expression can shift just so subtly, and it'll go from implying anger or sadness to joy, and that we can see the same thing when it comes to type or mark, which is really projecting forward to see what it is that we as designers and our students will be doing. So one example of that would be bridging analog and digital experiences. I try to, in my own work, have this dance between form and type and aesthetics. That's not just what it's about. Understanding the function of whatever it is that you're doing and how it lives in the world. And so that's really all about the experience and how people react to it.
Meaghan Dee is a dog-loving typography nerd who is both a practicing graphic designer and a design educator. Currently, she serves as chair for the graphic design program at Virginia Tech and is co-chair of the AIGA National Design Educators Committee. Prior to joining Virginia Tech, Meaghan worked professionally as a designer for the architecture and design firm Marnell Companies, where she worked with architects and designers on large-scale resort projects. Her primary focus in design is in branding, typography, user experience design, editorial design, and packaging. Meaghan collaborates on a regular basis on freelance design projects and grant research, and her work has been awarded nationally and internationally by the American Advertising Federation, the AIGA, Graphic Design USA, Graphice, High Typography, How Magazine, Print Magazine, and UCDA. Welcome to our conversation where Meaghan and I discuss the importance of community and networking in design research. Meaghan, thank you for joining me. It's so awesome to have you as a guest here on the Design Podcast. Hello.
Hi. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, of course. Again, I'm having a lot of guests on my show who are educators that I've ran into throughout my decade plus of teaching. So I've been finding that really awesome that it's like, oh yeah, we met back then and we worked on these same conferences and so on and so forth. I don't know if that's just happening by happenstance or by design, but nonetheless, it's really great to connect with people that I've stood alongside with and worked conferences and different things at. So if you would, a little bit about you then, that short abstract CV kind of plug.
Yeah, so I am currently at Virginia Tech. I am an assistant professor, although I've just submitted for a tenure, but I'm also running the graphic design program here. I've also just taken over as co-chair on the AIGA Design Educators community. Mm-hmm. And I've been a part of that group and as a board member for the 3 years prior as well. So I've been here at Virginia Tech for just over 8 years. And I used to run a student-run design studio called For Design here. I spent 3 years doing that. Got my graduate education at Virginia Commonwealth University, which is what brought me to Virginia. So I'm originally from the Midwest, St. Louis specifically, University of Illinois for undergraduate, and lived in Las Vegas working for a large architecture and design firm, doing a lot of logos and branding and mural design and illustration.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So doing design work for an architectural firm.
Yes. It was an interesting experience, and I'd never been to Las Vegas until I had an interview there. And that was in the days when they had a lot of big budgets and right before the economy tanked. So interesting time to be a part of those things.
Definitely. And and that's why I kind of love this profession. Whether you're an educator or a designer, you get a chance to really go anywhere and do anything. And I think that's amazing. Quickly, for those that are listening, when you get a chance, definitely check out Meaghan's website. I've already commented offline to Meaghan about how beautiful it is and how beautiful the work is. We all have our own aesthetic and our own style. And oftentimes we kind of look at our own stuff and are kind of like, okay, I'm making things. But always remember you guys are making great things, and Meaghan's making some great stuff too. I'm kind of looking at her website on the browser I have open at the same time that we're talking. Wonderful stuff. And you're doing so many things. How do you balance it all?
Sometimes better than others. I would say that one of the things I'm striving toward now is keeping things more in balance. I do sometimes have a tendency to um, take on a lot and then, give up going to the gym for a little while, things like that, and trying to balance health and teaching and research all at once and having home life and those sorts of things. Uh, I would say that I've been pretty lucky with just having a lot of opportunities come to me by being at Virginia Tech. It's a large research university, so there's some institutions in place that really connect you with other passionate people doing cool projects. And some of it's just more happenstance. I know I've done some collaborations with the School of Performing Arts, and I believe a lot of that has to do with we're in the same building. And
Mm-hmm.
so, walking down the hallway on the way to the bathroom one day, someone asked me if I wanted to participate in a large scale research project at we've got a 4-story black box theater just across the street here. And so getting into immersive theater design with that group. And
Yeah.
yeah, so a lot of it's just saying yes when opportunities arise.
Yeah, that was something I actually wanted to touch on during our conversation. So I think we're going to definitely come back to that and talk about that community, that networking, and how it really adds to or takes away the opportunity for research. So as I've mentioned in the first episode of this season, this is episode 2 of season 1. And the season is basically focused around this idea of research as just kind of this overarching big theme, and then what that means individually to each person that we speak with, and eventually how does that relate to their teaching. So balance is a big thing that's really important, and as we're talking about that, before we get into more about your particular research and talking about balance. Does the research for you seem to come and go in waves, or do you say, well, my summer's my research time? I think a lot of young educators, as they start on their career path, young being young in the career path, because some of us enter at different stages of our lives. Do you find this a constant thing, or do you plan time for that? How do you set aside that time for research?
So it really varies a lot from year to year and semester to semester. And I would say I'm getting better and better at finding that balance. But uh, summers are, times to do big chunks of research and also to recharge. Um, but I would say that what I try to do is little check-ins with myself as well. So sort of looking at a semester or a period of time and thinking about what it is that I'd like to do. So sometimes there might be a large scale project and you have to do that thing, like a grant research or a collaborative kind of thing. And other times it's a little more open ended.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get that kind of big picture in mind. And then I'll do a little bit of a weekly check in most of the time where you see what your week looks like. And if it's really jam packed, it might not have that many times, but what I found that works best is if I can actually block off some few hour long chunks at least once a week to preserve that research
Mm-hmm.
time. And for me, a lot of that looks like creative research. I prefer the making, although a lot of that has to also
Mm-hmm.
do with reflections on those makings. But occasionally it's more writing or those things as well. And I try to keep active with client base. I do some freelance for a company in town here called Joba, and I've got some other contacts as well. And so that's a little harder to plan for because you don't know when the next logo project is going to pop up. But
Yeah. Well, that was something you didn't mention either when you were doing your introduction, is that you're an active designer
oh yeah,
as well, and that even amplifies that how busy you are as well. And you also just mentioned grant writing, and I think it'd be great if I revisited this idea of grant writing in another season, and we kind of did some talks on that alone. We're creative people, and we're teaching in a creative program, and writing sometimes is that one thing that all of us kind of hate to do or don't really understand where to go and how to get through that process. So what kind of What does your research look like, past, present, and future? Let's kind of give it a little overview then.
So I did come from industry. So as I was talking about working for that large scale architecture and design firm, so that was my initial launch. And, addition to having some more editorial experience, I was graphics editor for my college newspaper and art director of a community magazine back when print was alive and well.
Yeah.
And so during graduate school, I kept on with a lot of freelance design. So Las Vegas was, they said, the third worst hit by the economic downturn, which had a strange impact on really spreading my network out. And that about 2/3 of the company I was working for was let go, but they ended up all starting their own firms or working different places. So I worked as a consultant one summer for my former boss, who joined up with a different architecture firm. And but I really didn't want to stay in Las Vegas for love it or hate it. But so then my graduate research was a little bit more into thinking about mark making and how type and image relate to how we can react to them. So there was an Alain de Botton quote about how eyebrow or an expression can shift just so subtly, and it'll go from implying anger or sadness to joy, and that we can see the same thing when it comes to type or marks. And so, and since starting it, that was not verbatim. He did a better job, but that concept. And so then at Virginia Tech, running that student design studio was where I started. But then when I transitioned into a tenure track role, I began taking on client work more for myself again. And I'm one of those, I feel that desire to make. And so I have different projects I come back to, like mailing individually designed cards to strangers as a way to just kind of make things and connect with others.
Is that the Postcard Project?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's on your website as well. So those that want to check that out. Okay. Continue. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's totally fine. Yeah. And so since Virginia Tech's a research one, really 40% of my job is supposed to be teaching, 40% is supposed to be research, and 20% things like service to both the at the university and organizations like AIGA. And so because of that, I think I have a little more time, but also I have to perform some research. And so client work and things can count, but I've also had some nice grant projects. So one of my fellow faculty in studio art was working on a grant project with an engineer where he was creating firefighting protective body panels for this humanoid robot that was designed to go on naval ships to help put out fires because you couldn't put people down there. So that's not something I ever would have thought that I would ever do. But because the opportunity arose, I sort of just took it. So I've had a few kind of more happenstance, larger things, and a couple more self-initiated grants.
Okay. Let me ask you this question too, because I've as we do our research, there's different expectations from different universities.
Yes.
There's different expectations from your own department to your college dean to the president or the upper level review when it comes to that research. And this is the tough part that a lot of young designers or a lot of young design educators need to understand is really be aware of what the expectations are for that university going in, because you need to know if it's a match or not to your ideals, to your beliefs. So bringing that around, do you think that does your research have a fluid consistency to your research, or is it happenstance of these different projects? And how do you keep them related to the overarching research goals that you're doing?
That's an excellent question, and also really good advice to educators. So I would say, just as an aside, one of the things I'm trying to do with the AIGA Design Educators community is actually build an archive of promotion and tenure guidelines, and also documentation of CVs and things. So it's not really off the ground yet, but that'll be open to everyone if I do manage to gather enough information there, because at my university, we didn't have a benchmarking standard in place. So we're considered a SHEV peer institution. So we look for other institutions that fall on that to see what other designers are doing. But it's such a moving, open-ended target that it can be quite hard. So our university most broadly defines to get promotion to associate, distinction at the national level, and for promotion to full is distinction at the international level. And so if you can, whatever your research might be, find ways to get peer review, whether that's conference papers or publishing journal articles or books that in which it's been reviewed, or award shows and things. So I think because I do a lot of making, I'll try to enter competitions and things just as a way of getting that peer review aspect in place.
I think, you talk about moving targets. I think one of the fastest moving targets is like award shows for design educators.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what does that look like?
Did you hear F&W Media just went bankrupt as well? I was going online to look for the competition, and so it's closed its stores as well.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So it's even getting more difficult for sure. And it's the type of thing too where I've had in the past direction saying, well, you should be competing with professional graphic designers. Yeah, right. You did the same thing that I always do. Like, you do the eye roll and go, no, it's not the same, because, I'm not working professionally full time with getting
with a group.
Yeah. And then they say, well, what art exhibitions or awards shows are you getting your work into? And it's like, well, it doesn't work like that either, because graphic design doesn't necessarily fall into the same category as fine art, So it's a really tough struggle when it comes to that kind of stuff. So then again, that question, if you want to talk maybe about a couple of your projects, and then how are they all interlocked? How are you finding that interlock?
Yeah. I guess I didn't answer that part of your question.
Well, yeah, we got talking about some really important stuff, so that's completely fine. And then, I'll ask the second part of the question after.
So I actually answered the question. I would say that was one thing we had for promotion to tenure. You have a 4-page candidate statement you write, and the number one thing they kept drilling into me was, how does everything connect? How are you doing something with robots and mailing postcards to strangers and making a logo?
Yeah.
And I would say, well, because I did them, but really some of those threads. And so I think for me, a few of them are connecting design and technology and what that looks like, or more broadly, sort of the art and technology. A lot of interdisciplinary collaboration, although that's a funny one because universities really promote that as well as design communities, but then you also have to be accountable for, did you do 10% of that project or 90% of that project or 1%? And so it's a funny little bit of a dance.
So what are the projects so you've talked about the robot project. So you and some students did like the skins for the robot, and I believe it was to make it seem more friendly to someone that might be in distress. So that's kind of a I'll use the word semiotic, but it's not really that. But it's a memory of someone that's a safe person to trust in helping you.
Yeah. So for that one, it was a few years back, and so the sculptor that I worked with, and we had a creative technologies graduate student. So I did a lot of the research and positioning. So looking to other industries too, such as industrial design, and you might be looking at motorcycle gear. One of the challenges was robots can move in ways that humans can't move. So how flexible can you be with that? having colors that would be easy to see in a fire and would let people know what the purpose was for that. And also thinking about the uncanny valley. If you had something that looks too close to human, it can be creepy, but cute wouldn't necessarily be appropriate either. So, but they did research that found people that interacted with robots on a regular basis, if the robot seemed friendlier and they liked the robot, they would actually treat it better. So some of it can even be to get people to take better care of things they're interacting with.
Oh, that's really interesting. And it looked really cool too. And I tell everybody, hey, go back to Meaghan's website and click on grant research and check out the robot project. That was really cool. So then how do you find this tie then between putting skin, right? How do you skin a robot and then do like a Shakespeare piece in a fine gallery, or the poetic pieces that you've done?
Yeah, so I think too, seeing how my work can kind of develop over time. And I really have a couple sentences that I worked for months on that I should be able to remember, although I think I've mentally blocked everything from tenure out of my mind. Just
that happens.
waiting and seeing what happens. But I think for me as a designer, communication with others is one of the big threads there as well. So, for instance, with the Shakespeare project, we had these projected typographic videos that I created that went along with audio recordings of students at Virginia Tech who were going through Shakespearean sonnets. And it was in this beautiful large theater where you could only hear it if you stepped into this sort of spotlight of sound, where we also had a spotlight so you'd know where to stand. So the idea that you would have this auditory experience where you'd hear Shakespeare and the visuals. And then we also worked with a music professor here who created ambient sounds. And there were 139 speakers, I believe, in that space, which enables you to have locationalized audio. So when you'd walk by part of it, you might hear a babbling brook and then birds chirping from higher up. So trying to get people to live with Shakespeare a little bit longer than they might otherwise, and that multimodal. So just playing with communication in different senses. And Poe was the same kind of thing, but it was more of a 360 video. There's a round theater that you can project onto. So trying to find ways for people to change those experiences, and you can observe and react. I think design in general too is trying to figure out where they're going. I know AIGA National and Meredith Davis and some others have put out the Design Futures, which is really projecting forward to see what it is that we as designers and our students will be doing. And, so one example of that would be bridging analog and digital experiences. So for instance, if you have an app like Uber or Lyft and you order a car and it arrives, how does that experience translate from that digital experience to the physical? Or online shopping would be another example of something like that. So these are issues that wouldn't have existed when we were in design school, because apps didn't exist when we were in design school, but also just that ability to look forward.
You said this one word multiple times, and I think it just kind of sums it all up: experience.
Yeah.
You know, we're no longer designing for print, right? That's the accolade we're all used to. You know, but we're designing for an experience now. And I've said this in previous podcasts, so I apologize to all the repetitive listeners that hear it again. I even talk to students about when they're building a poster now. You know, great, you built a poster. What's the experience? You know, how does that interact with me in the space that I'm in the time that I'm at, and all those other elements? So I think that's a huge part of it. So I forgot my second part of that question now. Figures, right? So I'm trying to recall it, and I just feel like I can't get it back. So let me see if I can segue myself into it. So we talked about experience, kind of being that big tie. You've talked a little bit about communication and technology. Do you think that's kind of the tie that pulls your work kind of together?
I would say that's a huge part of it. That understanding how people are engaging with your work and how your work is functioning in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also in general, the design industry is caring more about listening to the user. And I try to, in my own work, have this dance between I truly care about form and type and aesthetics, but that's not just what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
And so understanding the function of whatever it is that you're doing and how it lives in the world. And so, like you were saying, that's really all about the experience and whether
Yeah.
something's ugly or beautiful or how people react to it. And, I think, too, with both my own work and the projects we do in the classroom, thinking about what's the best fit, like what's appropriate. Should this project be a poster or should it be a website or should it be
Mm-hmm.
something altogether new?
So let's use that to move forward then. So from these few experiences, so you've kind of broken down your own portfolio work, your student portfolio work, and your grant research. And I'm assuming that in your tenure application, your portfolio work, your client work, is just as critical, as important to you as an educator. So let's just start with those research projects. How do you find that correlation between what you've gained from that research and those installations and those experiences that you're pulling back into the classroom? So the question may be, are you looking for those when you begin that research? Does that interest in the classroom prompt the research, or does the research prompt change in the classroom?
Yeah. So I do think that they're becoming more seamlessly integrated for me, although sometimes in the classroom might involve students, but not actually be in any of my classes. But I don't care too much about those lines. So, for instance, last fall, a creative technologies faculty, Wallace, who I work with, approached me about working on as a faculty advisor on this NASA suits project. So
Oh yeah.
we got a team together to look at creating extravehicular activity, augmented reality systems for astronauts.
Wow.
And we got an engineer, a computer scientist, creative technologist, a couple graphic designers all together. And we were one of the finalist teams and went to NASA to compete on site and got to talk to a space architect and see mission control. And I just found out this week one of the graphic designers that went just got a job at NASA. So
Oh wow.
really excited for her. So that was one where even though the role was really faculty advisor, not what I'm doing, where the research and what I've done with thinking about AR, VR, and other systems um, really seamlessly wove together. So,
Mm-hmm.
but technically, I guess that wasn't a class for me. It was just our students doing that kind of thing. So, but then other times, I've got the seniors this semester, and I'll have one project in the semester that I'm calling a passion project.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to get them now to think about what they want to be doing after graduation. Uh, in
Excellent. Yeah.
part to think like, oh, if you want to be an app designer or a web designer and you haven't done much with that, maybe you should. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but they'll be assigned a find something you care about and find the best way to create something for that. So it might
Oh,
be research, a local cause you care about and create a website to raise awareness or a social media campaign. So leaving it pretty open-ended, but then also allowing them to maybe tag on to some real world projects. Uh, so we're probably going to have another team for the NASA project this year. So if they wanted to do something like that, they could. And we had connections too with a project here called Future House, which is a prototype for the home of the future. and
Okay.
it won the International Solar Decathlon this year. So we didn't have anything to do with the architecture, but we had a small grant to create an app for the home. So I worked with a team of students on creating that prototype for an app. And, so they got to have that nice interaction with this real world project that's out there.
Oh, see, that's perfect. And it seems to be connected to, and by the way, those are all on her website as well. Go check it out. They seem to be all, again, I don't want to keep saying it, but the experience design, as far as a graphic design, a visual design application, keep coming into play. And it also seems to be this idea of your community that you're working in your network. You talked a little bit about how the exhibition space was across the street,
Yeah.
how your colleagues are just down the hall sometimes, or within the university. What would you have to say to add to that discussion about the community? How do we even find out about that kind of stuff as we're getting into education?
Right.
And you might be moving through that chain of adjunct, visiting, lecturing, and whatever it might be, and then you just want to this is going to be it. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
How do you pick a university? I mean, the university also has to pick you,
Right.
but that can really change. It can change your trajectory in what you do.
Yeah, truly. So I would say that all sorts of communities are helpful, and that I think part of me knowing about all the resources that are here and knowing the people down the hall are I've been here for this is going on my 9th year now, and those first few years I really didn't have that. It was much more isolated, and this is Blacksburg, Virginia. It's not New York City where there's things every which way, and so you do have to find things a little bit more. But I think in building community and when you are meeting people, being open to listening. We've got an institute called the Institute for Creativity, Arts, and Technology here, and they host Friday talks with different people. So going to things like that. I obviously believe in AIGA since I'm part of the design educators community.
Yeah.
But that's been truly beneficial to me. I've seen people that I look up to who, even if it's just 5 to 10 years of where I'd like to be, it's nice to have those role models and mentors in your life, as well as then what we can give back to other people. So they've launched the design teaching resource, which has projects and things for people. And you talked a little bit about wanting to think more about design writing. So that's not my number one strength, but Dialectic is a design journal that AIG has helped get off the ground. And we're really trying to help promote design writing and connecting with the diversity and inclusivity group at AIGA. And we really try to represent across the country different types of institutions and different backgrounds. So what we're representing of education is holistic, not just a narrow lens of a few different types of schools. But I would say, so you and I met at TypeCon, and that's another group that does a really nice job of supporting education. So they have a whole day education forum, and Sharon AIGA, who organizes it, is lovely. Hopefully I didn't butcher her last name.
Shout out to Sharon and Guy. Sharon and Guy. Yeah.
Okay, I did butcher her last name, but she's lovely. So things like that, where by having a event like that where you can be in person, and then AIGA allowing educators to have a track at the national conference is such a great way to see what other people are up to. So you might be lucky and have something down the hall, but you might be in a one-person program or where you don't have anyone there. So
definitely. I was gonna bring up the fact of like some universities are really good at that community shout out emails or whatever it might be, that these events are happening. And typically every university has so much going on. It's absolutely amazing. But I'm always shocked at the amount of involvement, kind of when you go to some of these events, and the turnout is kind of slim, and you just kind of wonder, or it's just little niches, like it's something, let's say the science or the engineering department, it's just like this little nucleus of the engineering faculty, and then if somebody else is there from somewhere else, they don't really interact. And it happens even at TypeCon and any conference you go to, you get the familiarity and you find people kind of nesting in their own safe zone. And so I think it's really important that we as educators kind of break through those and go introduce yourself to someone else and find out what they're doing and just be curious. I think that's one of the most important things.
Yeah. I think also being open to opportunity, that little bit of serendipity. And, sometimes it might be a big grant project, but most of the time it's probably not, at least not right away. And so just building those connections, having those conversations.
Oh, exactly. I just worked with a professor from the music department. He teaches trombone, and I designed his new CD package for his new album. But that's a connection to the music department where I can say, hey, Justin, who can I talk to about this thing or that thing? Or reaching out to him to see if he wants to be involved in some type of musical composition for an exhibition or something like that. So yeah, those little opportunities that may seem perhaps insignificant, it's a bad way to call them, at the time are actually great opportunities. So we don't want to forget about those. What about the students now? So it's really hard to get students involved. So do you guys have an AIGA student chapter?
Yes, I also run the AIGA student chapter, although I would say, we have years where we're really active and we always try to bring at least one designer to campus, and we're lucky that we usually have some sort of visiting artist designer budget, and we've got some nice relationships with a screen printing faculty in the architecture school where we'll often bring people in together. He has a thing where he tries to get different designers to create posters for the university. I think it might have started when we invited Jay Ryan, if you might know, the Bird Machine, who screen printed a poster promoting his visit to campus, but he's gotten Martin Vodetsky and different people to do it. So it's nice when you even just have one partner in crime, which can help with some of these things. Although I've got a good faculty here as well. But there is that balance, and I almost go more for less but better now, because I was finding my own burnout and the student burnout of, if you have mandatory events, first of all, it's really hard if people have jobs, and how do you balance trying to be understanding as a human and no, you need to care about these designers. So just trying to build a little bit of that studio culture within campus and let them do a little bit on their own, but also having, whether it's a film screening or portfolio review or bringing a visiting designer, just to get them excited. But there is that saturation point for sure.
Yeah. I just realized too that our conversation kind of organically moved away from, finding a university that kind of aligns with your research. Yeah. Let's skip back really quick and touch on that. Do you have advice for that?
Yeah. I'd say read the job description for starters. So, being on both sides of search committees now, I've seen I can see why I did get an offer there or didn't get an offer here, because when they say required qualifications, they mean required qualifications. But I'd say it's a little bit of what you'd be doing in the day-to-day. It's also who you'd be working with, and the size of the program, I think, matters quite a bit. For instance, right now we have 4 faculty and we have one cohort of students that moves through our graphic design program. So we're very tight knit and we all work together a lot, and you have to be able to teach all different levels when you're such a small program. And then there's others that might have different sorts of resources. If you have, say, 20 faculty, but you might be teaching 2 sections of something very specialized, or and then other people that have to do everything all on their own. So,
yeah.
And some of it too, I think, is location. So I never would have thought I'd live in Southwest Virginia. I like it here. It's been growing on me quite a lot, but because there's also travel opportunities, I think that's something that balances this university for me. So it's a little bit of that living in, the Blue Ridge Mountains, which has its pros and cons. No traffic is a really nice one. But then also getting to do something like a study abroad or connect with other people at conferences. But yeah, the making sure that what the job description is aligns with what you really want to be doing.
Yeah. So did you, in landing at Virginia Commonwealth, did you kind of look around and go, well, they got this great gallery space over here. Well, they've got this going on over there. So do you think it comes down to just taking things as it goes and just finding where the research fits, or is it something more plannable? Can we really kind of sit back and go, well, I think if my area and my passion is in typography, maybe it's not, Central Arkansas that I'm going to end up, and again, I'm in the same boat. I never thought I would live in Central Arkansas, but after being here for a year and a half, I'm like, this would like, duh, it's magical. It's beautiful. I've got great colleagues. I'm still trying to figure out how this changes my research, because I was an associate professor for 4 years at Purdue in Northern Indiana, and it was going on a certain path, and everything seemed to be falling into place. Then when I decided to change universities, and I left Purdue and said, this is what I'm going to do now, and I'm here, I'm actually finding myself going, well, that same area of research doesn't necessarily coexist with where I am now. And I'm really concerned, how does this affect my research? How does this change in my research change my promotion and tenure, right? Does it suddenly change what the university was expecting they would get as a faculty member? Are they expecting me to continue that research? So it's a very interesting dichotomy of like what I love, what they love, where am I, what's available. Yeah. Thoughts?
So I think one part of that is faculty need to complement one another. So while I have said we tend to try to teach at all different levels, now that I feel like we've gained more stability, like we've had a more established faculty for a few years, and we might be growing a little bit more, we're starting to get to say, okay, I guess I'm a type nerd, so I tend to teach typography classes, but even things of, do I take a deeper dive in motion graphics, or do I keep it a little more surface on web and app and motion? So I think having a faculty that's able to communicate in that way, if you're lucky, I think can really allow for that. And also, if you're lucky, having a program that understands that times change. And I would say that pretty much everywhere it does. So Virginia Tech at the university level has this initiative called Beyond Boundaries, in which they're really trying to create these interdisciplinary communities on top of undergraduate degrees. So you might be working with one called Creativity and Innovation, is more the kind of art side, but an engineer might come in and want to connect in those different ways. So I think education in general is even changing, so they should assumedly expect that our disciplines would change, and the life of an educator, especially if you get tenure, might be 20, 30 or more years. And so hopefully the department knows that it's going to change over time, but if not, maybe that's the bad fit.
Yeah. And this kind of reminds me about the student end to this.
Right.
I would say, and I don't know the numbers, you may even know data more than I do on this, but every university, I would say there's 70% of four-year universities that end up being a regional draw, local draw primarily, somewhat of a regional draw. But I would probably guess there's an 80% of a local draw to any university. I believe maybe a decade ago there was more opportunity to do a regional and national draw, but I think that now it's changed back to more of a local. This is where your students are coming from. So the students don't really have a choice, if you will, as to where the educator's focus is, where their passion is. I from your perspective, from being part of the AIGA Design Educators community, has that ever been a discussion before? I'm very curious about this, and do we try to communicate to students to do their research? Because it's important enough for us as educators to know where we want to teach and where we belong. But if a student's aspirations are to do XYZ, if they go to a university that has ABC just because it's local, and how many young students really know that,
Right.
And how do we let students know this when they're looking at us as a university?
Yeah, I'd say, well, the main mission of the AIGA Design Educators community is to provide resources and support and connection for design educators, with the idea that if you do all of that, then they can empower students and help students. So our emphasis has been mostly on helping design educators and not as much directly connecting with the students, as again, that's sort of what we want everyone else to go do. But I do like that as a conversation. And I think also the budgetary models are one thing that are shifting a lot of programs, and state universities have their own challenges, and you might think a school like Virginia Tech gets a lot of its money from state funding, but I think we're down to 17%, and
Oh, wow.
they're assuming it's going to keep being lower. And I was talking to someone else who said that their state school was only 4% funded. So I think too, trying to figure out where you get your students from, but if we can get educators to have communities and tools and to be looking toward the future, I think that allows that even if you're a one person art and design school on your own, that if those tools are available, it can help you as well. But and it is strange just to think where education is going in general. So Virginia Tech, for instance, love it or hate it, we also have that big partnership with Amazon. So there's going to be $1 billion Amazon campus outside of DC, which is about 4 hours north of here, or 12 if there's traffic. I'm kidding. But it's shifting how our whole university is thinking about things, because they're building up that secondary campus, which might even become more than a secondary campus. And how does it impact our current students? But industry partners too is a really big shift in education. And
yeah. So the design educators community is really kind of trying to keep on the pulse of this stuff. And hopefully all of our listeners to the podcast are trying to stay involved in the AIGA. So let me ask you, have you seen the involvement? Have you seen the numbers? We know kind of on a rough idea how many universities are in the United States. We know roughly how many design programs are in the United States. We can get a rough ballpark as to how many design educators are out there. What are you seeing from being a co-chair on the board as to the success of AIGA and the design educators community, and how that's working with us as a profession? Question mark? Yeah.
Well, I've been really pleased with what I've seen from AIGA National, not just the design educators part, where they've been more supportive.
Very true. Yeah, thank you for saying
educators. Yeah. So I know they've been revamping some things and also worrying about budgets and sustainability long term. But they really do seem to care about educators. And so I think having that positive relationship there is really helpful. And then I would say the individuals that are involved with the design educators community right now have been really phenomenal. We had an insane number of applicants to the board this past go around and, had the good problem of turning away a lot of really incredible, qualified, talented people, but hoping that they still want to connect. And so,
Mhm. Is there like a criteria that you guys follow for that?
yeah, so whenever we have a call for new board members, we're looking to try to have diverse areas of interest. So, both people that might be more making oriented and others that might be more writing, design writing, or traditional research. And then we also look to have different types of universities, so public and private, and historically Black colleges and universities, and usually an industry practitioner or two, as well as really representing as broad geographically as possible. So we've got, from California to Texas to Puerto Rico. So really making sure, because we could have filled the whole board with people from California because there's a lot of people in
Hmm.
California, but so sometimes it's hard too when there's someone would do a killer job, but there's already a representative from their area.
Yeah.
And so trying to
And
make sure voices get heard that way.
gotcha. And so what other successes are you guys seeing that you're working through?
Yeah. So, well, I mentioned briefly the design teaching resource, and so that's open archive for projects that anyone can upload projects. I've uploaded a few, and then it allows people to use those in their classroom. Hopefully, giving credit to the people who shared those. And then there's the Dialectic Design Journal, but also in association with that, trying to help people build up their design writing skills. And we've also got our online community. So, that side of things. And we always are a part of the national conference. And so this year it'll be in Pittsburgh around April Fools. And then we have a standalone design educators conference. So promoting research, promoting design education, and really empowering educators as best we can.
Excellent. And I also encourage a lot of our students to try to get involved from the
Yeah.
student standpoint as well.
Well,
W-
especially I think if you don't have a big city, it's
yeah.
a really important way to, well, that, and it can make big cities seem smaller. So I
It
always
can,
tell
yeah.
my students to sign up for the newsletters from the cities they want to live in. And,
Hmm.
our
Yep.
closest chapters are all 3 hours. We're 3 hours from Nashville, 3 hours from Charlotte, 3 hours from Richmond. So, just signing up for those different events, it allows you to break down those bigger cities. Not that they're big cities, but
Right, right. No, definitely. Yeah, it gives you that portal, even if there's not a student
yeah,
chapter, it kind of opens up that network and that community.
right.
Um, yep. Boy, I'm having one of those days where I've got a great thought and a great idea, and then something distracts it from there.
That's me
That's-
every day.
yeah, yeah. It
Although
seems
I
that
don't always have the great thoughts. I'm just kidding.
yeah, it's because we keep filling our brains with so much research
Oh yeah.
information. Um, yep. Yep, I lost it. So I'll go to the next. I'll go to the next thing that I had in mind. Then was some of the challenges that you might be seeing from that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say funding, unfortunately, is a big one. So we're having to get more creative. We'd had national or AIGA, National for Instance, with Dialectic, fully funded the first 4 issues, which was incredible. But it's not sustainable to keep doing so. So we have to get creative about sponsors. And I know conferences, it's the same kind of thing, like trying to figure out how can these things be self-sustaining. And universities, I think
Hmm.
we have similar problems of budgets getting cut. And if you're doing this really great research, or other people are, and you want to bring them in, how do you do that? I guess podcast is one way. No, you can connect across the country with just
Yeah,
video, but sometimes you have to get creative with how you can make things happen because you don't
yeah,
always have
definitely.
the same resources.
Yeah, because you could be working on a certain trajectory of research, and everything went well for the first part, and you've got a great exhibition, and everything went well, and then all of a sudden funding gets cut, and then you've got to change, you got to adjust. I
Yeah.
do remember now what else I was going to bring up about the good, and then we'll come back to some of the
Okay.
more challenges really quick. I think a lot of educators forget, the lines on the CV, the stuff that goes in your tenure packet. So like serving on the board of the AIGA is like, woohoo, right? That's like a big score. But I think we tend to forget even being involved in the teaching portal, where even if we submit a project to that and it's a part of that database. Yeah. A moment of technical difficulty. No, it's fine. As Meaghan works through that, the beauty of live recording. Almost there.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, it's completely fine. Do the batteries die on the
yes.
on the pods?
That's
awesome.
Planning ahead though, so I have backup plans. So sorry about that.
No problem.
What was your lovely thought?
Yeah, and this is part of the beauty of my podcast. And Gary Rosance, he asked me after the podcast, so he goes like, so edit out all my ums and my like pauses, and I was like, no, you don't understand. We're rolling, and this is basically that live conversation, and I don't want it to see manufactured or studio edited. So it's fun. It's a lot of fun. So my thought was, right, if we don't get on the board of the AIGA, we're like, oh, bummer. I can't. I really wanted to have that on a line on my CV in my tenure case, but uploading a project to the teaching portal is that's a line of you're active and you're involved and you're serving the community. And I think we have to always be remembering those opportunities. That's what I was going to bring up that I almost
and I would
forgot.
also say things like, as much as I do think it looks good, especially for maybe external reviewers and things like that, I am in an art school, not a design school. And actually, we don't have any tenured graphic designers right now. And so an art historian doesn't even know what AIGA is for the most part. And, so as far as people at the university even knowing what I'm doing, probably don't have much. But if there's organizations that you find that you're getting a lot out of, and I'd say the mentorship I got from others who previously served in this role is a huge part of why I wanted to give back, because it is a lot of time and effort. But you're right. Like, I think there's a lot of ways to get involved, and that, sharing a project on the design teaching resource and maybe connecting with someone who ends up using your project can really build some great relationships.
Yeah, I think you and I have a very similar model then for our place of teaching. We're an art program as well. We're fortunate enough where we do have one tenured graphic design faculty. That's my colleague, and he has been so helpful.
Good.
That's also a good comment. And I do plan on having a season 2 where we talk about tenure and what does tenure look like, and how do we even understand what to do. So besides the budget, do you think there's any major challenges?
For sure.
Okay.
Well, I think that a lot of the challenges facing everyone in the U.S. are facing designers too. And some of it's more political than others. So I was a few years ago accepted to be a part of this artist residency in the Arctic, but it was one that you had to fund your own travel to get there. And I wanted to make it a part of a larger research project on global warming. And I applied to a number of grants for this. And a few of the ones that I had applied to actually, in their comments on why they rejected it, said it was because one of the reviewers did not believe in global warming, and so therefore would not supporting such research. I'm not saying that's the only reason
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But, there's a lot of strange challenges facing designers right now. And I think communicating across differences, but these sort of strange political times too.
Yeah, I would agree. That's something in our one upper level graphic design course. We have a weekly discussion on a different topic, and it ranges from ethics to responsibility to what is thinking, and all kinds of different aspects. One of them coming up is the political environment, economic environment, and what those mean to a designer. So all those things, they never go away. They're part of what I do.
As a
educator, I really want to be inclusive of everyone in my classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And that means, conservative Christians and, ultra liberals outside of DC. And so trying to find a way for people to have good debates and discussions while being respectful of all people in the classroom. And how sometimes, if I've got things I care tremendously passionately about, like finding that balance of being able to be your authentic self in the classroom, but also not ostracizing people. I know, for instance, design organizations tend to be pretty liberal. And at the AIGA Leadership Conference, they had a whole ethics conversation around this book called Ruined by Design. And so I picked it up and had started reading it. And I'm loving everything it's saying, but it's saying things like, if you voted for Trump, stop reading now. And then it bugs me because I'm like, how can you have a conversation about ethics if you're cutting out half the conversation? Or
right.
But
interesting.
Very liberal, but still trying to figure out ways of being an ultra liberal that's not just trying to talk to other.
Yeah. How do you stay neutral and respectful? Through a lot of those
really having an inclusive classroom.
Word. I think that's really important. We could talk for probably another hour or two. I know we could. Let me ask you, any secrets of what you're working on now? Can you share what's coming up, or is it kind of like got to keep these things under wraps until it comes out? What's next?
So I would say that I have just gotten over the submit everything for tenure hump and just finished a study abroad trip over the summer. So I'm a little bit on the, did have an art store close here recently, which was very sad. We loved it, but they shared some of their supplies, like old Letraset and some projects.
Oh, wow.
And so I've been having some fun with creating some background images digitally, like using processing or other digital methods. And then I'm playing around with recreating them with these analog means. I think it appeals to my obsessive and perfectionist nature to mess around with those. So I don't know how much is going to come out of that yet. I've made one poster, but I think it could maybe become a larger series if.
That is interesting, because it is sort of a shift from your experiential work where there's a lot of technology involved, where now you're doing that comparison of technology to analog.
Well, and I would say there's some ongoing things. So we had that project where we did the 360 video of the Telltale Heart that I had illustrated. And I've got a partner in the university libraries whose focus is on AR and VR. And we're trying to make an augmented reality book of the Telltale Heart.
Oh, wow.
So the idea is that, you could interact, and really Poe seems like a great opportunity there.
That's exciting.
Trying to make that happen, and then doing the NASA Suits project again if we can get our team together.
Oh, that'll be fun. I'm gonna stay tuned to everything that you're doing, just because I just have this passion to see what all my colleagues, friends like yourself, and other educators that are out there that don't even know that I'm cyber stalking them and looking at their research work and the cool things that they're doing. So I can't wait to see how those things develop.
Thank you so much.
Of course, I'm sure that you do, and I know I've got some teaching yet to do today. So as we wrap things up, where can we come and find your awesome projects, awesome work, and kind of keep an eye on what you're doing?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much. I've got my website where I try to keep things updated, just meaghandee.com, spelled weird like Meaghans. And I'm on the normal social media with non-creative names because they're always just my name. And then if anyone ever wants to connect with AIGA, they're also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and just look for AIGA Design Educators Community or Design Teaching Resource.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm the same way. Everything's just like Peter Bella Jr.
Yeah.
If you just Google that,
that's my name.
You'll either find me or a bodybuilder or a doctor. So just look for the designer. That's me. I don't have all those other accolades.
I know. I'm old enough. I actually get all the right emails and things too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before they get taken.
And yeah, I definitely want to encourage people also to get involved, even if it's through Facebook, through the AIGA Design Educators community. How responsive the group is, how well they communicate with each other, how well the board is active and the administrators are active on that website as well, is fantastic. I've asked a couple questions here and there. I'm not like overly like constantly like in there asking for things or seeking information. But whenever I do, it's the response time is fantastic, and I get a lot of positive stuff out of that. So everybody, yes, let's continue that conversation, be part of the community, and it's amazing what we gain from that experience too.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. I believe in it, and I would be surprised if we run into people who disagree, but I know they're out there, and
but
I'm willing to.
We also want to know how to make things better.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like conversations with people about promotion and tenure standards. It's like, oh, we should make an archive for that. And
exactly. Yeah. Let us know how we can help. That's the idea. So, exactly. Meaghan, it's been a fantastic conversation as always. I hope you enjoyed TypeCon. I lived vicariously through you and some others that made it this year. I haven't made it for the last 3 years now, but I got to change that.
Yeah.
So again, I really enjoyed talking with you, and hopefully we can chat again really soon.
I love that. So
all right.
Hope to see you soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much, Meaghan.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining me on this episode. The Designed Podcast website is located at thedesignedpodcast.com. There you can find notes on the episodes, links to our guests, links to resources, and more regarding the many things discussed during each show. If you find the Designed Podcast interesting and informative, please subscribe on Apple Podcast or on your favorite podcast service. You can also follow the Designed Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, and subscribe to our video version of the podcast on YouTube. Please join us for the next episode of the Designed Podcast, and let's continue to create success in design education.